Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 71.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Maine Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Maine Guide, and in 1999 I founded the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident outdoors by using traditional skills, a few simple tools, and field-based experience. Whether you're looking to go from city slicker to competent outdoor professional, want to experience a remote expedition, or just want to learn a few new outdoor skills, we've got you covered. You can check out the show notes to this and all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. When you're there, click on the podcast button. And if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Lastly, the best way to keep up with our programs and trips is to join our email newsletter, and you can do that at jmbnews.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. Christopher and I are coming to you today from a remote campsite on a river in Aroostook County, Maine, where we are enjoying right now. You may in the background be able to hear the crackle of the campfire and some birds singing, and maybe later you'll be entertained by the nature sounds of a rare feller buncher attacking the woods about a mile from here.
They started at 3:30 this morning.
3:30 a.m. that guy's workday starts, and then he quits at 7:30.
Yeah.
So I don't know what those hours are. It's not third shift. It's some kind of wacky fifth shift.
Yeah, it's a really pleasant thing to wake up to. Is a
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, a feller buncher is a big machine that has replaced things like chainsaws and skidders in the logging industry, where one guy will go, it's got a big arm, it reaches out, grabs the tree, cuts it off at the bottom, limbs it, and stacks a whole bunch of them.
It's a giant killer robot.
But it can go super fast. If they had one of those in the Transformer movies, like, I don't even think Marky Mark could have stopped them.
No way.
I mean, Marky Mark would have done a heck of a job, but I don't think he could have done it.
Well, you can't compete with a giant saw blade that also speaks in a northern Maine accent.
Right.
You just can't beat it.
So what are we doing here? We're at the end of our final trip for the spring 2019 Wilderness Bushcraft semester. We've been out for 9 days. And we like to finish with a culminating event, and that culminating event for the students is the solo.
Yeah, they're doing that right now.
So they're out on the solo, which is why we're here with so much time to kill, hanging around camp. We do solos where students go out, obviously, on their own. And then we maintain, before we send them out, we make sure they know exactly where we are, where camp is. So if there's ever an accident or an injury, they can come back. They're not too far away, and we have a pretty good idea where everybody is. Mm-hmm. So last year, it was good that we were like that, because we were in camp. Christopher, Ben, and I were in the same spot, and we looked upriver, and we see a student floating downriver with no canoe.
No PFD.
No canoe.
But
he had a pole.
He did have a pole.
He had his canoe pole, and he's floating downriver, and we're like, oh, I don't know what to make of this.
Yeah.
But he had been carving and somehow managed to impale his knife into his lower leg.
Yep.
So we rendered first aid, and
not bad,
not
just
super bad, but
that's what we tell people is, even if it's just a little nick, come back, let us look at it, make sure it's not a big deal.
Little cuts, when managed, don't turn into big disasters. I think that's an important thing to do. So we're here. They've been out for 2 nights. They have one more night. Mm-hmm. It is, what is it? It's 8:30 in the morning, Tuesday, the 25th of June. I know you were I was up at 3:30 here, and that feller buncher guy started his day, and I think you had coffee on at 5, and we've pretty much exhausted every topic that we can discuss with one another.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
We're like, let's do something, and we decided a podcast.
Yeah, and as we were getting ready for a podcast, a hare decided that my tent looked very interesting and was trying to find a way in. I imagine it's bug free, and he's trying to get away from all his kids.
Yeah, this is the time of year when the snowshoe hares have recently had all their babies, and they're out in different spots on the landscape. So, like, when it's legal to hunt them in the late fall and winter, it's hard to see them. But now they're just these harried parents who never get any rest. And I've had one come out. I was sitting down
like on a bench, and I had one run out of the woods and come over and literally sit on my shoe that I was wearing for like 5 minutes looking around. I mean, you could make the argument that if he's sitting on my shoe, an owl wasn't going to kill him or whatever, but I think he was just saying like, look, man, I haven't had any sleep in days. These kids are driving me nuts. Like, just kill me. Just, if you want to, just kill me right now.
Just end it. I'm so tired. I'm so done.
But this is the time of year around here. If you go around and you look under little logs and things, you'll find these really cute little baby snowshoe hares.
Leverets, right? Isn't that what they're called?
I don't know.
Young rabbits and hares, or leverets.
But they're super cute.
Yeah.
And one year we had a guy find one and he put it in his shirt pocket and he's walking around with it. It's hanging its head out, and it's just, they're just adorable. So there is a difference between hares and rabbits.
Right.
Whereas rabbits are born furless, blind, and basically latch on to the mom, and they're pretty defenseless for weeks. Hares, snowshoe hares like we have here, are born covered in fur. They can run within an hour of being born. So what the mom does is she will put them all in different spots around the landscape. So if like a fox finds one, he doesn't get all of them.
Yeah.
Right? So right now, because we just had this hare hanging around, we're surrounded by little baby rabbits probably. I can feel their beady little eyes.
That's the most comforting thing I've ever heard.
I can feel their beady little eyes staring at me.
Surrounded by baby rabbits. What a way to spend a morning.
Yeah.
Hares,
Not rabbits. We don't have rabbits up here.
No.
Apparently, somebody said, or one of the books says there's some down on the, like in York County, down on the coast near New Hampshire, but up here it's just snowshoe hares. So guys are out on solo, the culminating experience, but we've had a great trip thus far, and I love end of the semester trips.
Yeah.
As a team building exercise, everybody comes together working towards a common goal, and just enjoying the beauty of the woods life with a grace and economy that's born of experience.
Correct.
I think when people show up, it's a lot of
show and tell.
There's a lot of inexperience, but after 9 weeks of working on it, there's no instruction needed. We get to a campsite, okay, we know what we need to do. Let's get a couple sticks of firewood and fell them, bring them back, split them up, and everybody just knows the drill and everybody just does it. And now is sort of enjoying the fruits of our labors. We've got a real comfortable campsite. We've got all of our needs taken care of. And it's just awesome. And then on the river, like for example, the other day we had a long day, 17 miles, and guys are working hard, and we covered it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting because when we start the course on our little half-acre pond at the field school, guys are having trouble.
Yeah.
They have trouble getting across that.
Yeah. And then the other day we did 13 of the 17 mile. I mean, admittedly, big current, big tailwind, but 13 miles in 3.5 hours or so.
Yeah, about that.
And that was the river has been really, really good to us from an educational standpoint this trip. The first day we left, sort of the put-in, the lake that we camped on, it started raining in the morning, and then by the time we got into camp, it was a downpour.
Yeah.
Everybody was soaked, everybody was wet, and they got like a real chance to, you were talking about them coming together as a team, as a sort of a group that has to work together, and that was, it took them 45 minutes to get a fire going, and then once it was rip roaring, and if you looked at everybody's faces, it was just, because we didn't help, we stood back and we watched them learn how to do that. They know this stuff by now, and they know what to do, and it's just seeing how challenging it actually is, and then actually accomplishing it in real time you could see it on everybody's faces, a really cool accomplishment. And half of them, they lit that fire and they didn't want to walk away from it, partly because they were cold and wet. Yeah. But the other part of it, just that it was just this thing that they'd just built, and in really tough, really challenging conditions.
We had already had an inch of rain.
Yeah.
Everything was soaked, and it was still coming down like crazy.
Yeah,
so.
And that was why we covered 13 miles in 3.5 hours, was because there's so much water in the river right now.
Yeah, we got up to almost spring flood conditions, and it's gorgeous.
It was awesome.
But it's a good point that, I think a lot of modern education is all about information, and, I think the information is the precursor to knowledge, but they're not the same thing. And then I think knowledge in action is wisdom. So I think that what they were demonstrating was wisdom about fire lighting in the rain, because it wasn't an abstract exercise. No. It was really pouring rain, everything was soaked, and how do we get it done using all the information and tools we have at our disposal.
Yeah, and we have sort of a thing that we say up here is like always be 5 fires ahead, right? Like always be, and the thing that let him get it was that a student had packed away a bunch of really dry kindling and tinder that he had been using for friction fire, and he went and grabbed that, and so I think that's hammered that home as well, that like, it's totally doable to go out in the rain and grab a dead standing. But if you've planned ahead for that, it makes it so much easier. And I think that's the biggest thing that students should take away from stuff like this, is that the preparation is everything, as opposed to just being like, well, my skills are good enough that I can get by with, I can deal with anything. No, I'd rather plan ahead and know that it's going to work rather than like hope that what I know how to do works.
Yeah. And it also, you've got to test yourself. You've got to test those skills, because if you're like, oh, I've read how to make a wet weather fire, but you've never been out in a pouring, soaking rain and done it, that's not something you can rely on.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
We like to, at the field school during the semester course, if there's ever a really rainy morning, students can usually be assured that we're going to do wet weather fire practice that day. Because every time you do it, you get a little better at it, and you build more of a knowledge base. And these were really challenging conditions that we were facing. So makes it really interesting. And I think that's the path to really knowing is continued practice over and over again.
Yeah, and having done, teaching paddling, we have students all the time that want like a really well-worded explanation of how to paddle straight, and what we always tell them is it's just miles. You got to put in miles and you got to play with it. And this course in particular, we had students that really wanted us to break it down for them, and then what really made them get it was us saying, okay, we're going to do 6 miles today. You guys are going to go out and do 6 miles today on your own, paddling around a lake. And by the end of that day, like, stuff clicked. Like, they just, everything starts to make sense once you've put in the work to do it, rather than just relying on, like you said, like having read about it or heard about it.
Or watched a whiteboard presentation. I had a athletic coach in high school. He had a great line. He always says, don't wish for it, work for it.
Yeah, agreed.
And the idea of, sitting around the fire talking about, I want to get better at canoeing, is not the way to get better at canoeing.
No.
And I'm been known for years to say it takes 100 miles to learn how to paddle a canoe and about 95 miles to learn how to pull one. But you notice in that explanation, there's no description of how many hours you need to sit around a campfire and talk about how you want to get better at it.
Yeah, of course.
That the path to mastery is always action. Obviously, there's some reflection in there as well, but you got to go do it. Put in the work, put in the hours, put in the miles. One of the things these guys have really excelled at, we have, I think, all but one of the students on the current semester are just about done with the journeyman certification.
They're knocking out the last few things while they're out there.
And I know the last one, they have to do 25 bow drill fires in increasing difficulty. Like the first 5, you can make a set in camp. Pre-dry it. But now we're at the point where they have to go in the woods and make a set from something they find in the woods. And then the very last one, which people were working on the other day, is to use all natural cordage that you make yourself. So you make the entire set, the entire bow drill set. So that's a neat thing, because when you can do that, and you can make an all natural bow drill from scratch with no modern cord, you really are, you've graduated to that level where you don't need man-made things to make a fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a pretty amazing, I remember the first time I did it. It's just an amazing and empowering thing.
Sure.
We've got guys just on the cusp, and it looks like they will, they've got to do something for the 2 days they're out on, 2.5 days they're out on solo. So I know we can actually...
They're being way more productive than we are.
We can hear them. We can hear squeaky bow drills in the distance from time to time.
Yep.
So it's a pretty neat thing.
Yeah,
And then the last day, the last official day of the course, we have something called Redemption Island. And I think we made that up based on Survivor, the TV show.
I try not to try to remember.
We based it off some goofy thing. But so we do a series of testing and practical exams throughout the course. And on Redemption Island Day, people can retest things that they have not been successful at previously. And I know we've got a couple of canoe tests coming up with poling and moving water and poling in fast water that people need to redo on Thursday. But I think I've 100% confidence that they're going to nail those tests, and we should have a whole bunch of newly minted journeyman certification holders. Yeah,
it's a challenging thing. I mean, all of the tests are challenging. They're not made to be simple. We don't want to pass people just because they've tried. We want them to really prove to us that, that you could go out and you could be a guide, or you could teach this to somebody. You have enough working knowledge that you can kind of diagnose why people aren't getting it and give them new things to try to fix whatever struggle they're having. But when they were practicing poling the other day, again, like we said, an inch of rain in 8 hours. That river was moving fast, and it was everybody swam practicing poling.
Swam means they dumped a boat.
They dumped a boat, a few of them multiple times, just because. Yeah, it's one thing to be like, oh, I can pole. I've done this in 5 inches of water with no current, and it was easy.
Yeah.
But then you get in a big current, and you're trying to go up it, and that water, if you don't get it right, it's not going to play nice with you.
Right, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely,
that's a good thing.
Absolutely a good thing. Because
the point of the testing is to prove that you know it. Prove that you've got this thing mastered.
Yeah.
And there's, mastery is a funny word. There's always more to learn. You can always get better. You can always do bigger water. Mm-hmm. But, the basic skill set and being able to do the basic strokes and maneuvers with the boat, prove that you understand that and can replicate it.
Yeah, and in more and more challenging conditions. I think that's the way to improve, is to just get the knowledge base down and easy stuff, and then slowly do the exact same things, but with the bigger current, bigger winds, all that stuff.
Yeah, the classic case is we spent some time on the pond back at the field school doing canoe T-rescue or canoe over canoe rescue. So, for example, if someone flips a boat in the middle of a big lake or river, if you have another boat, how to get that boat, save the people, save the boat. So, yeah, we do it on the pond the first day, and it's deep enough, it's still a little bit of a challenge, but that becomes more challenging not because you're adding extra things to the skill set. It becomes more challenging when the conditions get more challenging. So then we go out onto a lake, a big lake on a windy day, and here's something that you did on the pond, and hey, now it's really hard because boats are getting blown all over the place. Like, it's hard to get the canoe up to get the T and get the other boat on there, and if you don't guide people to hang on to the boat once the boat flips over, maybe you're a mile away because of the wind. So the environmental conditions are everything, and being able to adapt to them really demonstrates that people have achieved some sort of a deeper learning.
Yeah, and I mean, when we did that on the big lake that we put in on the other day, there's one boat, we have one boat flip, and then other people come and rescue them, and they got them up, and then
another boat
not on purpose, because I think what I saw was that a student stood up in deeper water and winds and hadn't totally settled themselves into being in the boat and was just trying to move too quickly and just flipped the other boat. And so one of our students,
then we got multiple boats flipped, and everybody's looking around wondering if we had concocted that scheme.
We had a student, Max, turn back and look at us, and he's kind of a quiet kid, and he turned around and asked us if we had told him to do it, and we're both cackling like idiots because we were watching it happen, and we're telling him no, and that's the hardest I've seen him laugh the whole time he's been here, because he just couldn't believe that it had happened.
It's pretty funny, and perfect timing, right?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect timing.
But yeah, the person who was still in a solo boat had to really push themselves to pull both of those boats up quickly. And I think that was, as funny as it was, that was probably a great learning experience for him, and managing the people, managing the gear, all that stuff.
Yeah, triage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I love getting out on the Allagash and some of the other, more popular routes. But for these trips on the Wilderness Bushcraft semester, I love seeking out the lesser known and lesser used routes, which is, one of where we are now. What did we see? We saw 2 kayakers float by, but that's the only other people we've seen since we've been out here.
In 9 days, we saw 2 other people. That's pretty.
It's pretty great.
Pretty great.
Yeah, and the weather's just been epic. We had that one solid 24 hours of rain that brought everything up, and here it is late June, and we're still having nights in the 40s, and all the bugs go to sleep, and when the sun comes out and it warms up, the bugs have been pretty fierce.
Yeah.
So it's been definitely the domain of the smudge pot.
Yeah, we've got a smoky fire going while we're recording this, and a smudge pot sitting right next to it, because they're already starting to wake up as it warms up. And
a smudge pot is just an old metal coffee can that we punch some holes into, and then we light a little twig fire in it, and then put little green boughs, green grass, green stuff in it, and it just gives you a constant source of smoke. So the beauty of a smudge pot is you don't have to wear all those horrible chemicals that'll make you grow a horn out of your forehead, or your grandkids will.
I want one on my chest.
Eat or something. So instead of chemicals, which are hard to replicate in the forest, we use smoke to keep the bugs. Smoke and layers of clothing, right? Long pants, long sleeves, and a big hat, and that keeps the bugs at bay for the worst, for the best, for the most part. The black flies will still land on you and crawl up, so June in the northern Maine woods is a pretty rugged month just because of the bugs. As the weather gets nice, and it's funny, we have people say when early May when we're out here, late April when there's still snow on the ground. Yeah, it's cold and snowy, and then once the bugs come out, they're like, "Bring back the cold."
I get it. I understand what you guys meant.
Anyway, it's pretty fun. We're having a blast.
Oh yeah.
And Christopher and I are just trying to figure out what are we going to do with our time today, because we can't really go anywhere in case somebody comes back. So it's like lots of book time, some nap time, catching up on the rest that you lost throughout the semester, and then just being here, for safety's sake, another day. So those guys come back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We do a quick debrief around a smoky fire, probably a big pot of strong coffee.
Yeah.
And then we float out of the North Maine Woods and head back to the field school. And,
clean up, turn them loose.
The big thing that still needs to be accomplished.
Ooh.
We have all these camp challenges, camp records, I should say. And most of them have to do with eating giant...
All of them.
All of them
have to do with eating incredibly insane amounts of food.
So we've got the Iron Spoon Challenge, which is currently held. The current Iron Spoon holder, Rafe Bowman. Rafe, if you're listening to this, we still hold you in high regard, and children revere your name because he ate 6.5 large ice creams from the Quick Stop 2, which is analogous to a gallon and a half or something.
With a wooden spoon, just because
that's
how he
carved
is.
His own.
Because he didn't want it. He wanted to mess up the Iron Spoon Challenge, so he made a wooden spoon and did it with that.
So the big noise is one of the guys on the course at the Mexican restaurant in Presque Isle, Maine, where people have gone for Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, mainly Mexican.
Apparently they have a 4-pound burrito, and if you eat the whole thing in 20 minutes, you get your name on the wall or something.
And it's free. So
we've got at least one guy who's going in there.
I know. That sounds like it's 3 of them.
3 of them, Wednesday night.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of It's going to be a lot of food consumed.
It's an interesting thing because the one who my money's on, Jeremy, is probably maybe 5 feet tall.
What did he say? He's down to 130 pounds?
127 pounds.
127
5 feet tall.
So
I have no doubt that he'll eat all 4 pounds of that.
My question is, he might try to eat 2 4-pound burritos and get his name in the Hall of Honor or whatever.
Oh, he's going to be so ill.
So we've got that going for us when we get back, and we're pretty excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
Last thing for today is we had a listener request recently, and the listener wanted to know about the challenge of maintaining relationships to coincide with sort of living the woods life and being out here and off the grid and away from home for so long. And that's a really interesting topic because it's one that we discuss constantly off the record. For me, it's always been a challenge to be away from home so much. But everything's a trade-off, right? And I think that The downside is that I'm away from home quite a bit. The upside is that when I'm home, I'm 100% present.
Yeah.
So I'm able to have that, big blocks of real quality time with my family.
Yeah, and it's sort of in my experience, like the communication part of it is everything. I think that's the hardest part, is like maintaining communication that isn't just like updating each other on like this. I'm doing this all day, like all day telling the other person what you're doing with phone or text or whatever. Like that's not what I mean, but like actually communicating with a person in a way that they're still a part of your life, rather than just like something that's drawing you away from what you're doing. And that, I think that allows you to be more present in both places when it's not like a thing that's constantly nagging at the back of your head. I'm not saying that that's easy to achieve, but I think that that's what makes it work.
It is the hardest part, I think, of what we do up here, though.
For sure.
Is the the impact of being away, the impact on family. Yeah. Like for example, yesterday, my daughter had a dance recital that I had really wanted to go to, but I'm out here and I just didn't have the option to be there.
Yeah.
So you miss out on certain things, but there's also those are the curses, but the benefits are you get to be out here doing something you love, and when you're home you can be 100% present.
Yeah, and when we say it's a challenge, we don't just say that abstractly. We've had 2 instructors and close friends of ours that they started to need that more in their lives, and they went and did that, and we're happy for them. But it is a hard thing to maintain that balance. And it's not a thing that you just do it once and then it's balanced. It's every day you're kind of trying to weigh those scales correctly.
It's an ongoing struggle.
Yeah, for sure. Doable, but challenging.
But you were saying, I just read, one of the things that I seem to do just about every trip that we go on now is reread the book True North by
7,000 times you've read that book.
So yeah, I just reread True North yesterday by Elliot Merrick, and if you've never read it, it's an awesome book.
It is.
Where Elliot graduated from Yale University, worked for a couple years in the city, and then decided he'd had enough, moved to Labrador. This was in 1930, I believe, and I think it was his second year there. He was a school teacher. The second year there, he traveled up into the interior with the trappers. So they would pull up the Grand River in Labrador, a couple 100 miles, pull canoes upriver, carry around the Grand Falls there, and then snowshoe, toboggan, trap, subsistence hunt for a couple of months, and then bring all their fur back. So the reason I bring this up, number one, is because it's a book that you should read because it's awesome. But number two is that I think that history-wise, people being separate from their families, from their loved ones for long periods of time to go and work and do something has been something that's been very common throughout history.
Yeah.
Figure people going to sea, people joining the military, people going up into the woods to trap and hunt. People taking contract work and going somewhere away to send home the money has been very common.
Even going back to sort of what I imagine Paleolithic times, where if your tribe lives on a herd of a certain species, like you're probably following that herd for weeks and months at a time.
Like the traveling going after the spamalopes, where they get the spam from.
Yep, the spamalopes, and the meatfallows. The meatfallows.
What is that?
Buffaloes made out of meat.
What?
You've never had a meatfallow?
No.
Oh, well, you're missing out, man.
I've had buffalo wings.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know they could fly.
Well, they evolved out of that niche and lost their wings, and then they became the meatfallows, and they're just a giant meatball on legs.
That sounds delicious.
But anyway, so probably even back to like Paleolithic times, I would imagine. You were not always around. And that was, I think it's only recently that the sort of constant connection became the norm. And for the person that asked, like, how do you maintain that? The reality is, like, we don't really know either. We're still figuring it out with sort of the advent of that ability to be constantly tethered to people. I definitely don't know what the hell I'm doing.
But technology has definitely made it easier.
Yeah.
I talk about when I finished my undergraduate degree, and then I moved to Alaska. It was 1995, And I remember this I'll date myself, but there was no internet, at least for me. There was no email. Nobody had cell phones outside of the city, probably. And to call on the phone was like long distance rates, which was like $1 a minute, and it cost a lot of money to call. So essentially you would write letters. And so I wrote letters, but I remember standing in the driveway and I gave my mom and my dad a hug, and I said, "I'll write you." And it was sort of like goodbye. Yeah. We are not going to be in constant contact. Compared to today when, you can get a satellite phone and talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. Yep. And even without a satellite phone, most places have cell phone coverage and you can do video chat and all that. So I know one of the guys on the course now has young kids at home and he's video chatting with them every night to, talk to daddy and whatnot. And so the technology definitely makes it easier to kind of maintain those relationships. It's still difficult because you're still, absent, physically absent, but it definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think that's the part of it is that is accepting that if it's something that you want to make work, it is work. Like it's not something that you can sort of just let be in the background and think, oh, I'll get back and everything will be exactly as I left it, like a snapshot. Like, no, it's a day-to-day kind of thing that you work at with friends or family or whoever it is that you're trying to maintain that relationship with. And it's never going to be cut and dry simple. It's always going to be something that you constantly have to maintain. And I think that's if to the person that wrote, if this is an industry you're thinking about getting into, like, know that's the reality, is that it's an extra bit of work you have to do every day, but that doesn't mean it's not absolutely worth it, in my mind.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is, we're sort of talking about all the challenges, but the other side of it is that in working in this industry, you meet a lot of other like-minded people that are drawn to living this way. And, I have friends that I met when I was a student. We already mentioned him, Rafe Bowman, or, Ben and Paul, our former instructors and friends that, I don't see them all the time, but as soon as we're around them, it's like nothing really passed. That relationship is solidified by being out doing things together, and I found it's very hard to. I think I'd have to work really hard to make any of those people not want to get together and have a beer or something, And don't get me wrong, I could do it really easily. I have a few things in my head, but I'm not going to, because why would I ruin that?
Well, on that note,
I'm thinking giant deadfall filled with ice cream for Rafe. Ben, I'll put cookies in a pit filled with steaks. And Paul, I'm going to pull all the leaders off of his fly rods.
Wow.
If I ever decide that those relationships aren't one I want to maintain.
And there you have it. Yeah, well, I think we're going to maybe wrap this one up.
Terrible note to end it on,
but
I love you guys. I'm sorry.
So if you found this podcast remotely useful, please leave us a review or share it with somebody. We're going to get back to doing nothing here the rest of the day.
Nothing good anyway.
And probably go for a swim, maybe throw a few flies, see if we can pull some trout out of the river. And hope you have a great day. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you later. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.